Are you a musician who's not used to recording yourself from home? Maybe you're feeling a little frustrated because you feel like you don't have the knowledge or the equipment to get the best possible recordings. Fortunately, there's some really easy things we can do to level up the quality of our home recordings. I'm Staff Sergeant Jamie Parker, trombonist and non-commissioned officer in charge of productions for the United States Air Force Band of the West. In this series of videos, we're going to take a look at some of the most common mistakes people make when recording from home, and we're going to give you some easy strategies on how to avoid those mistakes, both from an audio and a video perspective. So let's get started with our first series of tips, which is 5 common audio recording mistakes and how to avoid them. Mistake number 1, you're in the wrong space. If I asked a trumpet player to tell me where they sound the best, well, they'd probably say anywhere and everywhere because they're a trumpet player. But most classical musicians would head for the nearest concert hall. After all, that's why we record ourselves in those spaces, because the reverberation helps us sound good. But in this case, we actually want to avoid reverberation. The strategy here is to capture an accurate representation of our sound with minimal reverberation and distracting elements, and then come back later with digital audio production and add that reverberation back in. All right, so we've agreed we're not going to go running out trying to find a concert hall to record in. So what is the best space in our homes to record? Let me give you a quick tip. Try to think of a practice room. If you've ever used an ideal practice room, it was probably appropriately sized for your instrument, so generally larger for louder instruments and vice versa. And it probably had some sort of acoustic treatment to minimize sound reflections. We want to try to find the space in your home that most closely resembles the ideal practice room for your instrument. So it might be a carpeted bedroom, but you would probably, on the other hand, want to avoid a space like a room with vaulted ceilings or a kitchen with a lot of hard surfaces or a bathroom. Plus, it might look a little weird on your video to have your shower and toilet in the background. Mistake number 2, you don't understand your space. Okay, so you've picked out a space to record in. Now it's time to make some observations about the acoustic properties of that space so that you can start to develop an understanding of how those properties are going to affect your recordings. So first, I want you to just sit in your space in silence. Shh. What ambient noises can you hear? Birds chirping outside, or just the sound of air coming out of the AC vent in your space? These are all just things to be aware of. You might also try this during different times of day so you can try to understand when is the quietest time in your space to record. Next, I want you to actually clap in your space. Okay, the sound of a clap is the initial attack, but it's also the sound of what happens after the initial attack. So I can hear some sound bouncing off the walls in this room, but it doesn't really cause much of a problem for me on my trombone recordings. Next, I want you to play your instrument in that space. How does it sound to you? Does it sound generally pleasing? Is it fine? Great. But if you're playing trumpet in a tiny space, it might be blowing out your ears, for example. So you probably want to find a bigger space. So for now, you've made some observations. I don't want you to get too hung up on anything you may have noticed because it may not actually impact the quality of your recordings. And we're going to get to that in the next step. Mistake number 3, your mic's in the wrong place. Okay, so I could take a microphone and put it anywhere in this room with me and pick up some kind of sound. But for every combination of mic, sound source, and acoustic environment, there's an ideal mic placement. And we want to try to find that. Now, before we delve in, I want to just note that some of us are going to be using the same device to capture audio and video, such as a cell phone. For those folks, it's helpful to examine the way your device picks up audio independently of the visual side of things so that later you can come back and be more educated when you're trying to find that happy medium between audio and video. So for everybody, I want to do an experiment. Start your device recording, and I want you to move to several different positions in your room relative to the microphone without stopping the recording. And at each position, I want you to call out where you are so that you'll hear it later on your recording and you'll know where you were standing in the room. And I want you to try some stuff real close to the microphone, and I want you to try some stuff further away, probably further away than you want to be. Maybe just exaggerate it so that when you listen back, you can really hear the difference. And try some stuff in between as well. And if you play a really directional instrument, why don't you also experiment with playing off axis. So don't necessarily point right at the microphone, but also try pointing maybe 6 inches to the right or something like that. And when you listen back later, you're going to start to notice those acoustic properties that are most pleasing to your ear at certain positions. You'll probably also notice that the closer to the microphone you are, the more present you sound, and the farther away you get, the more distant you sound, and the more sound of the room itself you start to pick up. It's not necessarily good or bad because for each instrument, there's a certain distance away in which the sound develops. So for some instruments, it's actually further away than you would think. For example, if you close mic a violin, you start to pick up a lot of the scratchy sounds of the bow. But if you step back 3 or 4 feet or so, the instrument really starts to sound natural. So the goal here is for you to use your judgment to find the most natural sounding mic position for your instrument. Mistake number 4. Your mic is overloaded or clipping. Now, in the last experiment, when you were really close to your microphone, you might have observed some distortion on your loudest notes. Or if you were using a cell phone, you might have noticed the volume suddenly dip when you played a loud note. And that's because of a phenomenon called clipping. Check it out. I'm making my mic clip. Doesn't sound very good, does it? So try to imagine your device as a glass of water. If I pour too much water into that glass, it's going to overflow. And that's sort of what's happening here. We want to try to avoid it. So it's always better for you to set your mic input levels a little too low than a little too high. Because if they're too high and you allow your mic to clip, that audio information spills and is lost forever, just like an overflowing glass of water. If you're using a cell phone, the easiest way to compensate for this is to just step back a little further. But if you're using a device like a digital audio recorder or something that has a way to adjust the microphone input level controls, you have some added flexibility. Now let's say that you like the sound of your instrument with the mic a little closer, but you're getting some clipping. That's when you just need to turn your input levels down a little bit to compensate for that. And it's also worth noting that these devices will have some sort of graphic representation of your microphone input level. It's called a meter. And if you notice the light at the very top is coming on and staying on or lingering, maybe it's a red light, that means you're clipping out and you need to turn your input level controls down. I think that knob is right up here. Mistake number 5, you're getting bogged down in the details. Now, I just threw a lot of stuff at you, and there's probably no way you're going to be able to do it all. But in general, the 80-20 rule applies here. 20% of the effort is going to generate 80% of the results. So just try to do as many of these things as possible and have fun with it. Now that you're starting to develop an understanding of these concepts, when you repeat this process in the future, you're going to be able to introduce refinements that help you continually improve the quality of your home audio recordings. So that's our 5 common audio recording mistakes and how to fix them. In the next video, we're going to look at video. It's a video. How am I not a dad yet? Anyway, you don't want to miss our video, so make sure to smash that subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment. We want to know your questions, we want to hear your suggestions for future videos, and we'd love to know if you have any ideas about how to improve the quality of your own home audio recordings. Until next time, thanks for watching.